welcome. We'll go ahead and get started here. Today is February 28th, 2003. Welcome to the Great Falls International Airport Authority Board meeting. As a reminder, the mission of the Great Falls International Airport Authority is to optimize transportation services and development in our region, and the vision of the Great Falls International Airport Authority is to maximize the airport's benefit to our region. Welcome to the public. Thank you all for being here. As always, we do encourage participation, so if you have anything to say, please stand, identify yourself, state your address, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. We'll start with the roll call. Commissioner Eritz. Here. Commissioner Gibbs. Here. Commissioner Hogan.
Yo.
Commissioner Husted. Here. Commissioner Lalonde is here, and Commissioner Timbo.
Here.
Awesome. With a quorum board present, we'll call the meeting to order. Start the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Uh-oh.
Is it sinking?
Is it sinking or was it just
It
lower?
might have just been down. Oh, we'll give it a bit.
We got a couple in the back piston.
I'll be all right. All right, we'll start with the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-to-day items that require board action but do not appear to have a significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion or vote by any board member. Items this month, you've got item A, approval of board meeting minutes for January 2023. Item B, payroll checks for January totaling $118,222.28. Item C, maintenance and operations checks number 27272 to 27339 totaling $1,055,228.06. Item D, approve passenger facility charge totaling $48,468.18 for January 2023. And item E, financial reports for January 2023. Any board member have an item they'd like to pull for discussion?
Not pulled for discussion, but Vince wasn't present.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Just
But I was.
how's
That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No,
Let's
we
see
need to-
here. I got him off signing. I must have missed him.
Yeah, sure enough.
Yeah, I'll fix that.
Perfect. Anything else anybody would like to pull for discussion on the consent agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Got a motion? Any comments? And a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye and nay. The ayes have it. Director's report.
Yeah, a lot to report on this month. I'll start off by just talking a little bit about the summer schedule. We're able to see out into July now in terms of the scheduling tool that our consultant provides us. And looks like volume's going to be pretty flat compared to 2019 through July. We're up until May, and then June we're up a little bit, and then July is pretty flat. United is the largest growth airline for the summer. They've got about 30 to 40% growth in volume throughout the summer months. They're transitioning to 2 Airbuses a day. There's still some RJs in there in the schedule here and there, but most of the flights are on a 319, and then there's actually some 320s in the schedule also. So they'll see 30 to 40% volume growth. That's on top of growth last year that in some months was up to 90% volume growth. So it's growth on top of growth, which is pretty exciting to see that kind of growth. The increase in the United seats is offset somewhat by the, when compared to 2019, by the MSP flight, only being an RJ this summer. It's good we have it back, but you might recall back in 2019 we had a main line on that route. So we've got substantially less seats to Minneapolis compared to 2019 than we had. Obviously a huge increase over last year when we had none, but still a decrease compared to 19. And then of course Alaska normally has 2 summer flights. Usually about half the year they run a second flight. but with their pilot shortage issues, they're not running a second flight this summer. So the increase in United is essentially offset by those two Delta and Alaska reductions, and we end up pretty close to 2019. So we'll see how the passenger demand holds up. As I mentioned in the weekly report, January was a little bit disappointing. The seat count we would have expected to be probably up what I would call normal back 2018, 2019. But unfortunately, the Salt Lake flights only boarded about 60% of their capacity. They were the only ones that were really what I would categorize as low. Everyone else was either 70s or 80s. We were missing out on a couple hundred passengers that would have gotten us kind of back to normal. Nonetheless, we're still only about 200 passengers lower than 2018, 2013, a few of those Januaries. So we're getting back to close to normal, but you have to go all the way back to about 2013 to have a pre-pandemic January as bad as we had. So getting close, still a couple hundred passengers shy. We have the capacity, we just need to get it boarded. So hopefully February will be a little bit better. As far as we can tell, the parking lot looks pretty full. We should start seeing some stats in a week or two, see how February was. We have a lot more seats in February even than we had in January. I think we're plus about 14% capacity over 2019 in February. So hopefully we'll get those full. A lot of that capacity is Allegiant. They tend to fill their seats. We also had a charter, that was just yesterday, wasn't it? Sun Country went through to add some extra passengers. So hopefully February will be a decent month and we'll kind of get ahead of back on track to be kind of a 2019 year. So that's the hope. We submitted a TIF reimbursement request to the city. It's been, what, about 2 weeks, Shailene? Maybe 3, for about a little above $900,000. We're having a meeting with the city
On the 9th,
on the
next
9th.
Thursday.
So next week we'll have a meeting with them to discuss that. We're also having a meeting in that same meeting to talk about bonding for the remainder of the amount that they don't have in the fund. Last time we were updated, I think there was about $300,000 or $400,000. Some of that will have to pay issuance costs for the bonding. So we think there's probably $300,000, $350,000, maybe even $400,000 available. We could get cash here, hopefully in the next couple months. And then the remainder of it will be bonded, hopefully by summer. And so we do anticipate about that $900,000 getting paid back in this current fiscal year. Ideally, it might leak into next year a little bit with that bonding. But that'll be good to get that back in the coffers. Same with LEO reimbursement. We're working with TSA. There's been some turnover at the regional level. Really all the regional folks have changed in the last 2 years. And so we've got LEO costs, law enforcement officer costs, that we've submitted to the FAA, to the TSA about a year ago now, a little more than a year ago now, about $120,000 that we're waiting to be reimbursed. We're also, I instructed Shailene to go ahead and pile on 2022. If we got a $120,000 problem, we should go ahead and have a $350,000 problem. So we're submitting all of our LEO reimbursement costs for 2022 and trying to push this thing through the system so we can get that reimbursed hopefully as soon as this spring, I would hope this fiscal year. So we'll hopefully hear something from TSA in the next couple of weeks on where the holdup is.
Do we get interest?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
wish.
Exactly.
At 4%, please.
Or at least I'm in the sorry, I doubt we're getting that either. But we'll see. We've had a little splurge in GA leases. Laura, do you want to kind of detail everything that we've leased up on hangar spots?
Yeah, we've actually filled up the 60 by 60s that are up front to the runway. Right behind that line, we can still do 60 by 60s. We had slated them for 60 by 80s, but we filled up the last 3 spots since we last met, I think.
Yep.
So those are all filled across the front. So
And
I'm
we
still
just-
working on an 80 by 80 a little bit further back.
Yeah, we have a prospect that really is getting pricing right now from local contractors. So the first 80 by 80 lot hopefully will go down. And he even said if it goes well, he'd be interested in maybe buying 1 or 2 more
Yep.
to lease out. So that's really encouraging. And then you think all 5 of those 60 by 60s will be built this year?
That's the hope,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what everyone's trying to get done.
So it'll be good to see.
And they're all kind of working together too, talking about things and trying to get a little bit better deal out there,
a little
so.
better pricing if they can kind of
Yeah.
put one order in. So that's encouraging. We certainly are proceeding with trying to get the other 2 taxiway stems put in this summer. That's one of the projects on the agenda later, and that'll finish off that development, and then we'll have all those pads ready to go. So encouraging there. Was at the beginning of the meeting, Shailene handed out kind of our cash position. We've got a little sheet, looks like this. So you can see cash flow is holding up pretty well. We've got about $10.3 million in reserves right now. We're continuing to kind of bankroll the construction project downstairs, but we haven't hit a couple of the major cost elements that should be coming in the next couple of months. One thing we have out there is the purchase of the condo building. That could be up to $2 million out of reserves. That order is going to be placed here shortly, so I expect we'll have to put in some sizable deposit for that, which will drain on our reserves. We also need to move the CT80s probably in the next month. That's going to be $80,000 just on its own, in conjunction with all the electrical work and everything else that's got to be done, 2 baggage screeners of the CT80s. So we do anticipate the next month or 2 we'll have a $3, maybe even $4 million drain on construction costs that are coming through. So that'll start to draw that down. But we've continued to kind of add in some CDs over the last couple of months. As the rates have been rising, we've been able to get some short-term CDs, continue to get yields, 4.3, 4.5 yield. Can you update us a little bit on the money market for our bank account, Shailene, in terms of the
They haven't come out with that one where we can be bonded and then be 100% FDIC insured. It hasn't rolled out yet. She told me as soon as it is, she will let me know so we can get that taken care of, so we can have that sweep account that's 100% FDIC insured, not just the $400,000 or the $250,000, but anything beyond the $400,000 we would be bonded through the FDIC for, and then we would be fully insured on all of our money.
Yeah, and so we'll probably continue to put away some short-term funds in these CDs. Our first CDs start to roll over in isn't it, May? I think the first couple.
Yep.
And so
There's 2 or 3 in May.
we're getting close enough to some of those expiration windows. We can probably go ahead and put some additional money into those short-term CDs and allow those to expire out when we pay some of the bigger invoices coming up. So we'll continue to do that in an effort to kind of maximize what our reserves are yielding for us while we're waiting for some of these bigger expenses that'll happen between now and the end of September, most likely, to kind of when the curve on the terminal will start to really drop off. And then, let's see, I lost my notes. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. On the construction update, last month we've had quite a bit of activity in the terminal. One of the central elements that we've been trying to get completed is the IT room. Basically in kind of the middle back of the baggage claim area is the central IT room where a lot of the airline equipment will be housed. A lot of the equipment for our access control system will also be housed there. Right now we really don't have a central location where much of our IT is stored, and so this will provide an expandable space. There'll be a lot of rack space in there over time where we can bring everything to one central spot, get it back to the basement where the fiber enters the building pretty easily. We've got racks going around along the back of the building, which will allow us to kind of access the far gates on either side. So we're pretty excited to be getting that centralized infrastructure. The electricians are currently installing the racks right now. That room's getting close to being finished, so they can get all the airline equipment put in that central location. So that's pretty exciting. The construction crews tore out all the old garage bays, which were on the old exterior of the building. When we did the expansion in 2014, there was about a 30-40 foot overhang that we built out that way. And so those garages were recessed back in there. That area will be where the airlines pick up their bags and drop their bags off in the future. And so they blew that area out to kind of open up that space. All the equipment will be stored over there in the future too, so we can have that equipment inside. The garage doors are all up, the exterior brick's done. I don't know when the garage operators are going to be here, hopefully soon.
Hopefully pretty soon they're here. We just need them hooked up or energized. So
yeah, right now everyone's
Hopefully
opening
that's
and closing doors by hand, which is not an efficient way of doing it. And so hopefully those operators will be up by the next meeting, so we've got a way to get those doors open and closed. the work on the Delta and Allegiant area over here is nearing completion. Carpet's mostly in. Walls are painted. I think there's a punch list walkthrough next week. Is it already?
Yeah, I think first part of the month.
Yeah, and so we'll be punching that area out so that we can begin to relocate stuff in. Actually, some relocation's already happening. There's some racks going in and things like that, but pretty exciting. I think the move for the Delta Allegiant move will probably be near the end of March. I think we've kind of slated the 22nd. Isn't
Somewhere in there, yeah.
As a date when we'll move into that new space. I was down looking at the terrazzo yesterday, kind of right below us here along this part of the buildings where TSA had their offices a few years back. That was all concrete flooring with some tile on it. That's all been taken out now, and that's all matching the terrazzo, the original pink terrazzo that was in the building there. So we have that whole lobby area now floored. And they're going to be, I imagine, probably putting the counters in here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, they're going in right now.
Oh, good. That'll be exciting to see. So counters, scales, that kind of thing, so that when we get that area open, the airlines can operate out of there. We had a good meeting last week to kind of go over the phasing for the next phases and what we're going to do with baggage. It looks like we'll be in about a 2-month situation where we'll be hauling bags to the back to the CT-80s while we tear out the existing conveyors and try to get the new conveyors in. In the last week, I think it's been determined the Bozeman belts are available. So we've got our plan in place for how we'll deploy those into the new baggage area. Hopefully those bag belts will be showing up on scene here in the next couple of weeks. And we went ahead and notified TSA that we're going to move the CT-80s at the end of March. And so we've got a meeting, I think on Monday it is, to go over final details of the move. So we can get those scheduled. Anytime we move those machines, it's $40,000 to have them recalibrated. We can't move them. They have to call in their consultant to do it. And so we want to make sure we've got them kind of where they need to go so we don't have to re-jostle them again. So we'll have to move one machine and wait a week, make sure that everything's working okay on that machine, and then we can move the second machine once they're confident that it'll work. And then shortly after that, we'll be getting those Bozeman belts plugged in so we can have a bag drop in the middle of the Delta counter now. Once we get those Bozeman belts kind of in place and the two CT-80s moved, we'll probably be in a condition where either the airlines can take the bags to the back or they could use a bag drop kind of in the middle of the counters where the passengers could bring their bag over to somebody and they would put them on the belt, send them back to security. So that condition will probably be in place for, like I said, a couple of months while we demo the remainder of the airline offices around there and get Alaska kind of in a permanent, their permanent home. And then we expect the two take-back belts are still about 3 months out. That's the belts that will go behind the counter and take everything to the Bozeman belts. We've written a spec for that, the consultant has, and they're currently trying to get bids from the baggage belt manufacturers to provide those belts. So we should know more on the bag belt cost, I would think in the next couple of weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks, to get that system all tied in. And then availability. Looks like availability has improved in the last 6 months when we first started talking about it, but they're still out 3 to 4 months. We have plenty of work to do in the interim. We've got to get those airline offices vacated so we can build the new offices kind of back in there, and then we've got to figure out a way to get the terrazzo done in front of the new counters, because the counter's going back 30 feet, so the counters will sit on top of what is existing concrete flooring. So every one of those airline spaces has got to be prepped and terrazzoed. So still plenty of phasing work to do, but a lot of the bigger elements, I mean, we're really starting to see completion, mostly on this side over here, where the bag stuff is. There's not a lot of additional work that needs to be done in that entire area. So we're starting to get pretty close to that. The exterior is more or less in place the way it'll be. The bricks all been washed and installed, and so some stuff actually getting done. So
that Bozeman belts is a big deal.
It's a few $100,000.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, with their growth, they've reconfigured several times, so these belts are in pretty good condition. Steve had identified a plan. We could have used our existing belts, but our existing belts are 50 years old, and you know, some of those components haven't been replaced. And so, I mean, I question if they would survive the move. You know, so I'm pretty excited that we're going to be able to do that. And it won't last forever, but I mean, this will give us the opportunity to kind of replace those belts onesie twosie rather than one giant slug of belts. We'll be able to kind of replace those bows and belts over time, one at a time, and when opportunities are there that we have a little extra money to replace those. So pretty encouraged by all that. Anything? Oh, we hit the internet line yesterday. The plans didn't have a data and power line that was identified yesterday by the concrete saw. When we were down working behind the bag belts, they hit a line down there, brought down the internet for most of the tenants and us for a while, and then some of the power in the building too, because they just got one strand of a couple leg circuit. And so we had some outages yesterday. Fortunately, I mean, it was a pretty decent time of day for that to have happened. It wasn't during the beginning of the day or even at the midday push. And so I think everyone's up and operational now. I see a couple airlines out there.
Most of it is.
Yeah, so that's good. But we've met with Steve this morning, and we're going to abandon the idea of a trench drain back there. It seems as though there's quite a duct bank of lines under there, and where we thought it would be below the floor surface, well below the floor surface in its own concrete encasement, it appears it's actually poured into the floor surface, not very far under the floor surface. And so we would have to tear up that entire area, lower that line, or deconflict that line and re-pour. And so there's already 3 or 4 existing drains in that floor. We don't think the slip drain really adds a tremendous amount of capability. Most of the machines that are parked there, aren't there very long. They're unloading bags and getting out of there. So we don't see that as a place where stuff will really, drop snow and drain water. The storage areas will have their own slip drains throughout other areas down there where most of those machines will melt out. So we don't think it really hurts the function of the building. I know during design I had questioned how many floor drains we had in there anyway. We did remove some then. But this one I think we'll probably be okay. There is existing drains. We just don't have them in a big trench drain now. So anything else on the construction side I'm missing there, Rod?
No, I think you got pretty well covered.
Good. And we started some initial design work with primarily LPW on the canopy replacement or the canopy rehabilitation. I've gone down there a couple mornings and met with their staff on some ideas. One of the biggest problems, actually, hey Rob, would you mind throwing up those blinds? One of the biggest problems is we want to transition as much of this membrane roof out as we can, and so first of all, it's ugly. Second of all, it's not very functional. And then third of all, now that we have a drain line that actually goes underneath the sidewalk, it's going to be much easier for us to get that water to exterior gutters like on a normal building and get that water into that drain pipe. And so one of the problems we're having is we're trying to transition this part of the roof to a normal roof, a normal pitched roof. And we've got this condition where these caissons kind of stick into the building about 8 inches. So we're trying to find the right treatment to kind of let us bring that roof back without interfering with the function of the exterior of the building. In all conditions, we have four, right, of these entrances? Yeah, 4.
4, yeah.
1, 2, 3, yeah. And so in all cases, it's underneath an overhang from the deck above of about 5 or 6 feet. So it doesn't catch a lot of water, but there will be some water in a driving rain or even a snowstorm that's going to come and hit that glass and go down to that ceiling. And so in discussions last week, the best option we've come up with so far is probably to leave a 1 or 2 foot pan along the bottom of this roof where it reaches to the building and let that roof kind of be out there on its own about 2 feet off. So we'll have kind of a metal roof structure that pitches all the way down there. At the very end, it'll transition into translucent panel to create kind of a skylight when you walk outside. So if you can imagine down there, when you come out the sliding doors, you've got that area that's kind of a square where the roof is over your head. I think we're going to try to saw through that decking to allow us to look through to the sky. There's a couple of concrete rafters there, which will look really nice, that kind of give the roof its structure. That pan doesn't appear to be structural. So I think we can saw through that and kind of open that skylight up. So when you walk out there, you'll have kind of a translucent panel on the front of that apex. It'll be a clear panel so you can see out when you're sitting in here, you can actually see through it. And then we'll add some lighting in those entryways. And so when you drive up to the building in the early morning where most of our flights take off, or if you're arriving late night picking someone up, you'll have those fronts with a nice glowing front where that translucent panel provides some LED uplighting. It'll just kind of pop and give you, the absolute indication where those entrances are. Probably one of the most frequent complaints we get is people coming in at night can't figure out when they're walking in from the parking lot, can't see where the entrances are. And so this will provide that kind of cue. It'll give us that shed roofing, that pitched roofing. It'll be a much more longer term enduring situation than this membrane. And from the exterior, interior of the building, and even driving up, it'll give us a much better looking product on the top of this. The roof on the horizontal element that parallels the front of the building will go all to a metal roof that tilts back. So we'll catch all that water coming back on a gutter system. It'll put it down into the new pipe underneath. That'll all be metal roofing across there too, so you won't see that kind of gum structure up there. You'll see a nice consistent metal roofing with ribbing. The fronts of the pillars out there, the pillars themselves will get wrapped in a heavy gauge metal around the top, and then there'll be a new concrete lip poured around the bottom. Actually, they're not even going to pour them. What they're looking at now is precast panels. They would bolt right into the existing structure to help protect those columns that are down there for the long term. So we'll have some concrete kind of cast elements down there that bolt directly in, and then on top of that, we'll set some heavier gauge metal to kind of give it a little bit more of an industrial look. The siding on the exterior of the concrete will all match that same kind of color scheme, and then the front fascia on the front of that siding will pick up that aluminum color from the back. So kind of a darker color along the vertical element or the horizontal elements of the canopy, and then we'll pull that aluminum color front to the from the back to the front, kind of give it a reference point as we extend that look around the building. And then the signage that the architects have come up with, we're going to replace all the existing sign boxes that are underneath the entryway there, and they're going to go on the vertical element on the front. The current sign boxes that are down there, the mounting hardware has kind of failed a little bit. A couple of them are falling loose. This will kind of clean it up a little bit by putting it up on there. They're going to match kind of the two all gates sign that we've got up here. It'll be just kind of a rusted panel with a little bit of a curvature to it. That'll give the messaging of which door does what, bag claim, ticketing, terminal. And so I think it'll give it a nice reference and consistency as you come through the building. All those blue signs are being replaced with a rusted color signage as part of the signage program. And then you'll see that two all gates sign at the top there. So that'll kind of complete that consistency of the sign family. And then of course inside security, all the directional signage there is already that rusted panel. So that'll complete kind of our look all the way through the building, the same sign family coming in. And so I'm pretty excited about this project. I think it'll modernize the front of the building pretty nicely. Really should make that structure last another 30, 40 years, however long we need it to last, by getting that water to where it needs to be. The current system, for some of you folks that haven't been on the board that long, the current system is an internal drain system, so it goes through a low spot in that membrane roof. You can see one of them looks like it's plugged up right now. And inside that structure somewhere, some of those lines are broken. And so what's happening now is when we get a wet snow, in particular, it seems to be the wet snow, the roof is leaking on the interior of the door. So somewhere in that concrete decking, the water's finding its way through and leaking in. And so rather than have that internal system that we really can't maintain, everything's going to go to a next-year gutter system. That'll be much easier for us to see if there's leaves stuffed in there, if it's frozen or whatever, and deal with it there. So be a much better maintenance situation and really prolong that structure. We had it looked at engineering-wise last year because there were some cracks in there that we were a little concerned about, but the engineering came back and said it was in great shape, and so we think it's modernizing it some and giving it a better look will really update the building. And access control, that's the last capital project we'll update on. We had an informal or a non-required call last week with vendors interested in the program. I think we had 3 or 4 on the phone, and then we had 1 or 2 show up. We gave a tour in the building to look at some of the locations for that access control. I think we'll have good interest. I'd be surprised if we don't get 3 to 5 proposals for that. They might team, some of them might team up, might get a few less than I think, but I was encouraged. I think we got some good confirmation that we're pursuing the right project, and there's technologies that can do what we want them to do. Hopefully the pricing will come in, where we need it to come in, and we can maybe even extend that project a little bit. There's definitely more phases in the future that we'll want to do, but it would be nice if in this first phase, if we could afford to have some door sensors put on some of the doors where we're not putting in security. So we have a few doors underneath, for instance, in all the loading bridges. There's a stairs down with a door down there. We don't intend to use those doors any longer. We don't have need for them. And so we want to have those kind of locked out. But we'd like to put the sensors on there that tell us if that door is open, just so it would make security rounds a lot easier if we had notification if those doors have been opened. And so ideally we'll be able to extend the project to a few of those extra things if we get good pricing. And so I think the next steps are we have proposals or questions due in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, we'll be getting proposals this month and then hopefully scheduling some interviews. So that's all I've got.
John, just one point of clarification. TSA mentioned moving those CT-80s was about $75,000 a piece.
Oh, now it's 75,000. Escalation, huh?
40,000.
What a deal.
I know.
All right. Can we get a 2-for-1 coupon somewhere? Look up for a code online? Or? Yeah, well, there you go. That's great news. That's a lot. I know, especially when there's only one vendor that's allowed to do it, so, but, all right.
I'm pretty confident I can come in with a forklift. I mean, if you sleep the back door open, put an X on the floor, get it moved. Nobody has to know nothing.
Lord.
So with this increase in capacity that you talked about, are we going to see some downward pressure on prices?
I think prices right now are very competitive. I was looking, somebody called today and was asking about airfare to somewhere, where was it? Charlotte, I think,
Yeah.
Charlotte.
East Coast.
And so, I pulled up Google Flights and $300 or $400, to Charlotte, and that's 2/3 of the way across the country. I think pricing right now is pretty fair. And when I've compared, I've got to travel down to Denver on short notice, like a week or two, for personal reasons here coming up. And when I compared us to Helena, I was just curious, since I was already on Google Flights, we were actually cheaper than Helena. And I think Bozeman was a few dollars cheaper than us. But not a tremendous amount, even though they've got direct Southwest. And so, I think pricing right now is pretty good. Now, it is filling up for summer. It's one thing I have noticed in working with this lady today that's trying to go to Charlotte. She's trying to travel mid-June. It's kind of right at graduation, right at school's out, right at the beginning of vacation season. And that was a pretty pricey ticket. But and I didn't price Helena, but I'd be surprised if anyone's much cheaper than that. And so I think pricing right now is pretty fair. I don't know, United or Delta, what are you guys seeing in terms of what's being booked out there? To me, I think right now the pricing's not bad. Allegiant, your pricing's always good, so you get a pass.
It's fantastic, actually.
335 is our national average right now.
Yeah.
So 335, 385 is about our average.
Yeah. Are you seeing us pretty much at par with the other markets?
We are, yeah. Us and Bozeman, they're trying to keep us about around the same because we're pulling from the mid-Montana here.
Right.
It's kind of a split to take off some pressure from Bozeman just because they can't handle any more capacity. So.
And the biggest, what I explain to people when we talk about pricing in Great Falls, that, you can go back 20 years and there's still not a change in demand. You can look at this January, where we had extra seats. Delta flew Salt Lake at 60% capacity. That is, in today's vernacular, that's a failure. That is a route that is failing. 60%, when I started in the industry 25 years ago, the average load factor in the country was 59%. If you're still flying at 60, that's too much capacity. And so, I would say right now, when you look back at, the last 20 years, there's about as much demand as there's ever been. The problem is during those peak times, we are seeing plus ups in demand. more people are coming to Great Falls in the summertime, like they are most of Montana, and not even in the numbers that they're coming to the rest of Montana. So those summer flights are selling out quicker than they used to. The problem is we can't support it year round. January is a good example. I mean, we have more seats and we didn't fill them. And so, I think, rather than think about downward pressure on price, right now I'm more concerned about upward pressure on demand, where we're using the seats we're being allotted, otherwise we're gonna lose those seats. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Delta doesn't look at next, first quarter and say they can't fill 3 76ers, they can only fill 2. Historically we filled 3 50s, which is the same as 2 76ers. So I mean, I think, right now the pressure is really on the market to fill demand. And so I'd say right now pricing is at parity, it's fair. I think we're right in there with the other markets in the state. You're always going to find distortions in a market this small, 500 seat demand a day market. One, University of Providence basketball team traveling the day you're trying to travel on your preferred airline, right? The more you narrow it and pigeonhole it down, I only like Delta, or I only like United, or I only fly Allegiant. One UP basketball tournament out of town, and that flight, those cheap seats are gone. And so, one big family reunion, one big event with only 500 seats a day, that pricing is not going to be great. And so that's really what we see now. I mean, the whole of the market really needs to grow and fill additional seating for us to see much of a move in the pricing. Dwight, did you?
John, I'm thinking about your report that you generated at the end of the month and at the end of February, I guess it was. You were pretty gloom about the ridership. And as I move around the community, it's just frustrating to hear both constantly.
Yep.
What I feel is that I think we got the Costco Sam's Club mentality going on with the public.
Yep.
That they're just going to get a cheaper ticket
Right.
by going to that route. And I'm just thinking that to get this thing to right itself, do we need to do a little bit of campaigning here locally in the community, and not try to boast about cheap seats, but just how to buy a cheaper
Right.
seat, with reward programs or time of the week to fly.
Yeah.
You can get that price down for the people that are shopping for the price. But
And-
I think we're really losing our traction in Great Falls.
So I'd say
return.
a couple things about that. A lot of airports have tried it, and it's practically impossible. People won't put a dollar number on their time or even their gas money to go down to a different market. Colorado Springs tried a huge campaign to combat the Denver, when Southwest went into Denver, they had the exact same paradigm. Eastern Washington had the same problem with SeaTac. If you were over there in Pangborn or Yakima, people would drive a few hours to get over to Seattle. Same thing. It's local jobs. You're cutting your nose off to spite your face, but they still do it. And we do quite a bit of re-education on, particularly Facebook. When the articles come out, we go out and comment on the comment sections. The problem is that's hit with an equal backlash of, the typical, well, Susan's familiar with it more than any of us probably, but the typical crabby Great Falls attitude towards, our community isn't making progress and yada, yada, yada. And I always point out, look, you got to look at the airline brands we have, just like the grocery brands we have. Where's the Costco? Where's the Winco? Why do we have the only closed mattress firm in the entire state? The rest of them are all open. Ours is closed. The rest of the Bed Bath & Beyonds are open. Ours is closed. Where's the Kohl's? Where's the H&M? Where's the Chick-fil-A? Where's the Olive Garden? It's just another brand where's the Lowe's? It's just another brand that is available if we grew, right? I mean, in a lot of ways, American or a bigger 737 daily on Delta or any of those things that would move the pricing market are reliant on that growth. And the reason we don't have any of those brands is because we haven't had the growth. And so, I mean, that's what we've been out talking about in the community now for 3 or 4 years is it's a growth emergency. And it's hitting us all because Now, when you try to buy a pair of men's pants, you're down to basically one place that you can buy them, unless Sam's happened to have a shipload, back in there, and so, you end up spending that dollar online or in Bozeman, right? We've got to work harder to try and spend dollars locally, and we've got to work harder to try and grow the community, because we're all dependent on that for the success of the community. And the whole 12 years I've been here, I've been saying, we're not going to grow into these 76-seaters gracefully if we don't grow the community. And here we are, with a 60% load in January. So I don't think, and we definitely get that message out there, and some people are receptive to it, but when it comes to pressing the purchase button, there's going to be 20-30% of them that are going to press Bozeman no matter what you tell them, because they think they saved $40 a ticket, and by God, that's a good deal.
How much of the price complaint, it seems it's very lagging. What is the average person in Great Falls, how often do they fly?
Exactly.
And so when I fly, I'm flown often as of late, but I used to, and I feel like my thought of high price is $1,200, which when I hear $400, it's like, well, that's great. So I think there's a lagging complaint there that people just are somewhat misinformed from again, last time they flew, it was that much, but it's not anymore.
Well, we definitely, and some of it is definitely lagging. We definitely hit a point during the pandemic where there was a shortage, and that was in most markets. If you really look around the country at how many markets lost important routes, it was a huge number of airports. I think it was like a list of 400 or 500 airports that lost, or 400 or 500 routes that were discontinued during the pandemic, and so it cut to a point where we were really getting hurt there. And now it's kind of swung the other way. We've got some extra seats. I do expect the demand will meet, the supply the rest of the year, and we'll be in a good position for 2024 as some of the pilot pressure is beginning to loosen, and some of the airlines are looking to grow again. I think we're having some really good conversations, and even this morning I booked Jumpstart. One of the things I was going to mention, I booked the Jumpstart conference where we'll get to meet with all the airlines here in June and begin talking about next year. And so I think we're well positioned. The one X in the equation is community growth. The airlines are decreasingly interested in seasonal routes because of the shortages in pilots. They want a market they can put that plane in and it can perform all year. And that's a tough one in Great Falls. But in terms of the public perception, we'll continue to work, educate. That's why we get on Facebook and we put out the cheap flights that we found and that kind of thing to try and show people, look, there are ways to fly cheap, and we encourage everybody to use Google Flights. Has the best algorithm right now, shows you every airline, shows you every, like a whole month, so you can kind of mix and match days to try and miss those market irregularities. But honestly, it's tough right now for us to have any messages out there, because even when there's an unrelated article about weather that goes on KRTV or the balloon or something, you've got a bunch of brick throwers on there that we constantly are having to respond to with the negative comments.
John?
Yeah.
So just to kind of counter that, we're not growing and many people don't want us to grow. And you all know that Craig Raymond's leaving our planning and development department. But the city previously has sold about $80 million, or had about $80 million on average in the valuation of permits for new building. In 2022, we did over $206 million. And as he was talking to us today in a meeting, we're growing. And, we're there. It's starting to come up, and he said pretty soon, yeah. So I think that's the messaging we have to give, that we are growing.
Yeah.
So, we need another couple of good, strong employers to come in that would help, do that. But you look at the number of people coming in for the medical school.
Yeah.
That's going to be year after year. You look at the number of apartments being, built, et cetera. So the growth is there. And I also had one of the professors at MSU was here giving a lecture, and he said he and his family come up here to do their school shopping. His kids like the stores here. They like North 40. They don't have one in Bozeman.
Yep.
They can get a lot more clothes up here than they can down in Bozeman. So they come up and spend a couple of weekends a year to come up to Great Falls to shop.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We're hopeful that the whole dynamic changes. I mean, you know, there are certainly the seeds of growth out there right now, more so I think than the other 10 years I've been here. You know, it's just a matter of what will happen and will it hit during an economic cycle where we can grow, right? I mean, so we sort of missed one. We didn't have a lot of housing inventory at the start of the pandemic when people could be moving, you know, they were just up and moving, you know, to different communities because of school closure, that kind of thing. You know, will that economic cycle stay long enough, you know, that we can take advantage of some growth? Will we get anything out of the other communities since their costs are going up so high? Will we get some of those people to relocate up here? I mean, those are all the things, you know, that we need in that story as we begin to look at 24 and ahead for getting new airlines in here. And I think right now there's definite opportunity for seasonal routes. That'll still work because most of those are pointed at us. Chicago boards 70% inbound. You know, that's not a route that's built around Great Falls dynamic. It's built around getting people here. And so that's our opportunity right now that we have until we can get growth of inbound out. You know, the pricing, I think, will regulate as we do that more and more. And you're seeing it now as more seats have come in. I think right now pricing is pretty fair. And everything I've looked at, you know, across the state, and the data comes so late, it's like 6 months in arrears from the feds to see what the average ticket price is. But even that, I mean, that's only like $12 difference on average of actual tickets purchased between top and bottom in the state. Usually we're kind of in the middle towards the lower end. You know, it's not a huge amount. No matter what we tell people, they're going to make the decisions they make for whatever reason they make them. And I think that, you know, rather than spend money and effort on that, our money's better spent trying to work to get more inbound traffic on those seasonal times a year where we have extra seats.
When those requests come in and you look at them as commission, is there a corresponding number of new employments that go with those construction? Or is it just building, I mean, because it's a lot different building a warehouse versus a manufacturing facility.
Well, and you know, a lot of this too is what we're seeing is in the housing development.
Yeah.
That's where those permits are coming. It's in housing.
Oh, housing.
Yeah, yeah. So.
There's so many apartments being built. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So, and depending on what our friends down in Helena right now do, it's crazy what they're doing right now for cities to not be able to manage our own operations. But it could be that if you have a lot next door that you bought because it's, you know, you're going to have another single family home there, you might end up having a 4 or 6-plex there and nobody can say anything about that.
Right.
Yeah, it's quite unpleasant at the moment.
And they have the votes to pass something like that?
Oh, right today. Yeah, they amended it last night without a public hearing or any public comment.
Wow.
So don't get me started.
I can tell it in your voice.
So John, is it like over 4 or 5 years, I mean, would 120K kind of a number, is that where we ideally would like to get to see that not only fill but expand? I mean,
120K what?
1,000 people in Cascade County, just say. I mean, is that the kind of number we're talking about to get to?
Yes. I mean,
like Gallatin?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, absolutely. That's right. I mean, you know, so I mean, what I've been saying, and Susan's probably heard me say this for about, I think it's 4 or 5 years since we started working on it, but I mean, there's a reason that they tried to drop 50,000 MSAs from federal reporting a year or two ago, because they're irrelevant. And they're not going to exist in the way they exist even today, right? I mean, the pie chart of where your dollar goes, you know, that 20 years ago, I mean, it was 80% local, right? And you had your vacations and a few things you bought out of town, but all your money went local, you know, through a bank, your insurance company, everybody. You know, and now when you look at that part, it's inverted, that pie, it's inverted, right? So I mean, now like 20% of your dollars are definitely spent here. I mean, you've got people, you know, your banking relationships online, your insurance is on Geico, you know, your people buying organic food now online and having it delivered from somewhere else. You know, I mean, all the stuff is getting bought online. And so what that, you know, you have this amount of square feet that we've always had roughly for 20 or 30 years of retail, right? When you look at dollars per square foot of what that's generating, it's heading like this. So the only way to get it out of that and it hitting a brick wall and Bed Bath & Beyond goes away and you've got no replacement for it, Shopko goes away, who's going to take the space? You know, JCPenney's finally goes, the movie theater goes, the bookstore goes. What dollars per square foot goes back in there that's enough to get that above, you know, even maintaining the building, much less someone making a profit? There isn't any. There aren't replacements for Pier 1. You know, there's not a replacement for it. So the only way to get that equation working the other direction is to have more people. So that there's more dollars going back into the same square footage, you know. And so I think, in my opinion, and I think I said this 2-3 years ago when we had some meetings about it, I mean, if this town isn't 75,000 in 5 or 6 years, it's going to be a big problem. I mean, you're not going to be able to support what you have. And you see that, you see that already with the levies we need, you know, I mean, right? I mean, we're going to hit a wall where you can't continue to levy people to support what you already have. You got to have more people.
I'm not trying to drag out this topic, and it's bugging me. I get it. I get exactly what you're talking about. But what I'm talking about is the people that are flying. There's a high percentage that are going to Bozeman. We need to work hard to get them here, and that's all I'm saying. As I move around the community, I'm not hearing the airport promoting itself and saying, "Give us a try. We're making record profits in our parking lot. Let's offer discounted parking. Push back, you know, because if we're not doing anything, we'll get what we're getting." That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the thought, Dwight, and I'm telling you, I've seen a half dozen airports try it, and it doesn't work.
Okay.
You know, I mean, you know, it just doesn't work. I mean, Colorado Springs, we banged our head against the wall. So they gave free parking. For the month of December, they gave free parking. It didn't increase the passengers one whit. Now, we do plan to do some discounting this summer because it's a low parking month. That's more targeted because in the summertime when the days are long, people are willing to ask their neighbor to get up in the morning and drop them off. You know, so what we want to do is convert the drop-offs and the Uber traffic into parkers. That's really what we're looking to do. I mean, you know, the strategy right now, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but if you look at the leakage number, it's frankly not much different than it's ever been. You know, I mean, we've gravitated between 25 and 30% leakage for a long, long, long time. So there's more conversation about it, but it's you know, a lot of those people don't even ever buy the ticket. You know, and so I mean, it adds to the, you know, the cost of doing business in Great Falls. You know, the airfares that we have. You know, for sure. You know, we would all like to change that, but the way to change that is to work on the low-cost airline initiative and things like that where we can bring more service. And that's 2024 and beyond is really where we see the opportunity, where we can maybe get a low-cost carrier flying some routes out of here. I mean, we're having good conversations. The American service, you know, that we've got the big SCASI grant for, that's another game changer. That's what's going to move the pricing. You know, telling people, hey, look, you should spend more, you know, it's a losing battle. You'll never get that through their head no matter what you do. And I've seen some creative approaches to it, you know, but there for a while, some airports had a punch card program. You buy 5 days of parking, you get 4 free, you know, stuff like that. I mean, none of those programs have ever really moved the needle.
What about free parking for families of 7 or more? You know, if you're willing to have 6 kids, or you're free parking for life. I mean, that'll get population up.
I think that means it's time to move on.
I just have one question. I haven't been on the Economic Development Authority board for a while. Are they seeing a lot of interest, or how are things going on their front?
I mean, it seems pretty consistent. I think some of the interest they've had lately is more compatible with us. And I would say some of those bigger employers are more interested in a community like us now because they are seeing problems getting people to come to California, Oregon, you know, places like that. So I mean, I think but I mean, I don't know that I see a huge difference in the opportunities that are out there. I mean, I don't know. You know,
I'm just curious.
Dwight and Susan have been involved with that too.
Well, and I was going to say, we had, you know, Pasta Montana had just announced they're putting in another line. You know, so that was a huge investment that they're doing, as well as Montana Milling. So some of our existing businesses, local businesses, are expanding, which is good.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
We want that to happen, and
Yeah.
so everybody's working really, really hard at this. And I do know some people with large families, when they're flying, especially if they're sending their kids on their own, they want a direct flight. So that when I put my kid on the plane here, it gets to the next parent over here instead of having to stop somewhere. So that is one thing I think that does hurt us as an airport. But no, and John's right about the retail. Yeah.
Well, it seems like in general, whenever I come out of some of these meetings or just hear some discussion, it's always a very negative feeling. And even though, yes, it could be doom and gloom and there's some negative potential here, I think we all as community leaders need to change our approach of how we talk about it. I mean, Great Falls 5 years ago was very different from what Great Falls is today. And you look at Great Falls in 5 years, it's going to be very different from what it is even 5 years ago too. It's just, I think we need to look forward in a positive note, not this, hey, oh, we've never grown. And that's the mindset that keeps us kind of in this stagnant position. And so I think if I were a community member wanting to know how I can help Great Falls Airport continue to keep their flights and keep it at a reasonable price, I would want to know what actually can I do, what one thing can I do to help, because in my mind, I don't think I can do anything. Mm-hmm. So I think we should change all of our communications, but especially from the airport, turn it to this, hey, yes, you have to worry about what could happen from a negative perspective, but the community members don't. So we need to give them those action items of what one thing can you do to move forward, and again, I think change our tone in general. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we go out and rain on the parade. I mean, what I'm pointing out is, we've got to change what we're doing. Not specifically as an airport, but as a community, right? I mean, I think each organization within the community has got to look at it different. How do we attract more here, right? And, the answer for the airport is we need more seasonal flights. We've got to spend other people's money here as much as possible. And that's why the low-cost airfare initiative, which is the primary thing we talk about when we're out in the community, how can we get lower airfares? It's the low-cost airline initiative. And we partner with the chamber on that to drive that message. And we have now, for the first time in the 12 years I've been here, a pool that's pretty competitive to bring in a low-cost carrier here, and a pool that's for a new route. And I think that's really a pretty good success story, and that is what will move the needle, in terms of our narrative. The other thing we do too is we develop our property. I mean, that's how we help the community move forward. These condo warehouses, I mean, the one tenant we've got that we're trying to nail down, I mean, that would be a tremendous growth for our community. It's a company that sells, in the states around us, and this would be a huge increase in their production ability and ability to move the market forward for their business. Same with Love's. We had no Love's. That's gas that was going to another community in the state and being sold because Love's is primarily trucking corporate account. So they're going to skip Great Falls and go to Rocker or one of the other stations. We've got it here now. iState, same thing. They were outside the community. We brought them into the community. So I mean, I think we're pretty progressive in pushing forward with economic development. I mean, the highest, tallest aircraft hangar in the state was built here. The hangar development down there. I mean, we've got now what, six hangars getting ready to be constructed. I mean, that's probably $12 million. I mean, something like that. So I mean, I think we're doing what we can to move it forward while we wait for the growth in the community to catch up. But for now, our opportunity is really, let's get some more seasonal flights in the summer when we can fill that plane. I mean, that is our primary opportunity.
Are we seeing Canadian flyers again?
Yes.
Less, I didn't know this until a couple weeks ago, but Shane actually pointed it out down at the chamber. The U.S. is requiring them to be vaccinated to get into the U.S. It baffles me, but apparently if you're Canadian, you can't come back in. Have you experienced this?
I was there probably 8 months ago. It wasn't an issue.
Right.
As an American citizen.
As an American citizen, but the Canadians coming back in apparently have to be vaxxed. And
In other words, they have to get back into Canada?
into here.
Into here?
Yeah. And I was kind of shocked by that.
That doesn't sound
I
right.
don't think so.
Shane sent me the article. I mean, I think he's right. I mean, from my reading of it, that's part of the problem.
I just had a fishing friend that.
I thought that changed, like, when the
I did
Border
too.
crossings were so stacked up because
Yep.
of all of that?
I did too, but apparently it hadn't, because this was a recent thing that he brought up, and it was validated. He was working on it with Senator Tester's office for a while. And so I have to get an update from him about what they found out, but that was just like a few weeks ago that came up. And so I had been focused on it. I figured as an American, the rules were the same. You know, I'd actually gone up there in January and come back and not had a problem. But then shortly after that, he approached me and said, "Have you heard this?" And I said, "No, I haven't." But as we looked into it, it appeared to be correct. And that was the beginning of February.
What did we lose to other airports last year in terms of what?
About 30%. But so if you looked at every airport in the state, you can bet that even Bozeman is losing 10, 15%. You know, so I mean, our opportunity is about 20. And part of the reason for that is we compete with some of the markets in between us all, right? You know, like Lewistown or Havre or Browning. You know, so I mean, we're always going to have 10, 15%. I mean, that's normal for an airport. Even 20% is pretty normal. You know, so I mean, there's a 10% in there that, you know, probably, you know, because they've got more seats, you know, that airport's 10 times larger than us. You know what the cheapest airport in the West is? LA. We're not going to compete with LA either. You know, from LA, it's like SeaTac, Spokane. Every time you get a leg up on the on an airport size, you're going to have a cheaper ticket in general because there's more cheap seats available. So, you know, imagine a third of every plane, it's not even a third, but a quarter of every plane is the lowest fare, right? So the more seats you have in that quarter, the more opportunity there is for you know, seats to be purchased in that lower part of the seats, because the way the airline prices is in troughs. They have the cheapest trough, next cheapest trough, and it goes on and on and on, all the way up to the highest trough. So as everyone draws one out of that trough, there's less fares available. So, you know, and then even on a plane, a 76-seater, there might be only 3 fare codes, maybe 4.
9.
On that, really, 9 on a 76. But as you go to a 737, that's even more fare codes that are available, so more buckets become available. You know, so the bigger the plane, the more buckets there are that you can buy from, and some of those are cheaper buckets. So it's a matter of the size of the plane you have also.
So with 120 as the volume, we have room for another 24,000, is that accurate?
No, our normal flow should be about 180,000 people a year. We're still not completely recovered from COVID. Last year we did 144. So we've got about another 40,000, which is pretty normal. I mean, if you chart our recovery compared to other airports in the country, that's pretty normal. The standout is Bozeman has tremendous growth. I mean, you're competing with a machine down there where they're dumping millions, I mean, $10 million in airline incentives in the 10 years prior to pandemic, you know, to get Southwest, American, I mean, line them up, you know, and then on top of that, you have massive advertising budgets to drive the tourism in, right? And so, you know, you've got all that latent demand, you know, that's sitting there, and because a lot of that stuff isn't booked 4 or 5, 6 months in advance, because a lot of it's discretionary travel down to Bozeman, you know, let's go skate at Big Sky, you know, those cheaper tickets are going to be there longer than our cheaper tickets are going to be, you know, be in our market.
Well, I think we beat the horse today. We'll move on. It's a good discussion. It's an important discussion. We'll continue it beyond today and obviously beyond this organization. But thanks for the input. I think it's a discussion that we'll continue on with. But for now, we'll move on. Any other questions, director's report, anything on that? We'll move on to agenda item number 1, capital project taxiway Alpha.
So we're at the about midpoint of the life of taxiway A. It was reconstructed back in 2008 and 9, I think it was.
Yeah, 8 through 11 about.
8 through 11, and so the FAA recommends a maintenance course in about that 15-year period where you come in and put down a oil-based sealant to seal up all the cracking in there. You actually seal the cracks with some type of elastomer sealer, and then overlay that with that oil product, and then repaint. And so we're kind of at that cycle. We plan to use our entitlements for the project this year on that project. We expect the total budget of about $1.2 million. 90% of that's federally eligible for AIP, Airport Improvement Fund entitlements. So that leaves us with a local share of about $120,000. The 120,000 will recoup through the landing fee. And so we'd like permission to design and build the taxiway A fog seal for $1.2 million.
What are we trying to do this summer?
This would be this summer, yep.
How long will it take?
Fog seals, generally, they're gonna do it in phases. I mean, once they're mobilized, I don't think they'd be out there longer than a month or so.
Yeah.
With repainting though,
Yeah.
it might be,
Yeah, they'll come back after 30 days, they'll do an initial application markings, and they'll come back with special application marking.
Just like half and half, north end, south end kind of thing?
We're working on this
Yeah, we'll
phasing, but yeah.
divide it up, so
some back taxiing will be
back
necessary.
taxiing and stuff like that. They'll keep
Yeah, it
everything.
should go down pretty quick, and then you can usually operate on that within a couple of days, isn't it?
You know, within 8 hours, the surface sealant's generally sealed and cured out, so you could, you know, if you had markings immediately following that, you could drive on that within 12 hours of sealant and marking.
So it shouldn't create a whole lot of downtime on it.
Yeah, we can, but Alpha's easy to do.
I have a motion, any further discussion?
Easier than.
And a second.
Because we
A motion and a second.
Pieces of it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And ayes have it. Thank you.
We could.
Number 2, capital project, Southwest General Aviation Taxi.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, we're in the latter stages of developing that general aviation, 20 acres of general aviation hangar development, kind of in between Eagle Jet and Front Range, or what used to be Front Range now, Great Falls Jet Center down there. And we have the initial row of hangars sold out. The initial row actually faces what we used to call the Red Horse Taxiway. That's the one that we built with Red Horse a few years ago. So those are all taken, and the remaining hangar sites need taxiway access. This project would design and build the taxiway access for the remaining 3 taxi lanes that are in there. We had a kind of an interruption last year. The FAA came out with some new rulemaking and initially said, oh, you can't build taxi lanes in front of private hangars. As we got into the regional conference last fall, we brought that up as a talking point, and the region said, no, that's an incorrect reading that our local FAA had. And so it looks as though we can safely say that we can build these taxi lanes and construct get those taxi lanes in so that these hangars can be built. Total project budget is $640,000. We'll use the remaining entitlements from this current fiscal year, about $576,000, and we'll have a local share of $64,000. So we'd like approval to construct the taxi lanes for a budget not to exceed $640,000.
So this is the taxiway for the 5 hangars that you were talking about earlier, so.
No, the 5 that are being built right now actually face what was called the Red Horse Taxiway. It was the one that was built from Great Falls Jet Center kind of down to Eagle Jet. And so that taxiway had 5 hangars sitting right on it, so we could take advantage of that and then provide a back circulation route from Great Falls Jet Center. This is the ladder rungs above that. So we've got all these alleyways above that will have additional hangars off of it. Last year we built the leg of the ladder all the way up to the top there, and now we need to build the rungs.
But it serves one of them, that's.
One of the hangars, yeah. And then it'll also serve the T hangars that we're trying to get under development too.
And this will be this summer as well?
Yep.
So this is a requirement for one of the 5?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I move that we proceed forward.
All right, I have a motion. Any other comments or questions? Can I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And nay. The ayes have it. Thank you. All right, item number 3, condo warehouse lease terms.
Yes, as we've worked with our tenant over the last few months, in talking to them about their needs and trying to get into this development, as they move their production line into our location, they'll be upgrading their production line substantially to create more throughput. as they grow into that production, it's going to take them a couple years to really realize that cash flow. The cost of their equipment upgrade will be substantially more than the cost of the structure that we're constructing. It's a fairly significant investment. And so what they've asked is there any way they can kind of graduate that cash flow to help them kind of grow into the new production that they're going to have. And so we're asking for a subtle change to the lease. As you can see kind of down here in the updated terms, what we're proposing is we would, in the third year of the lease, we would provide a 50% rent in exchange for an 8% escalation in year 6. Essentially, the internal rate of return ends up the exact same at 5%. All we're doing is feathering in the rent increase so that they get a little more benefit in that third year to allow them to grow into that production. As they move into that building, it's going to take them some time to produce anything. So they're looking for some help in trying to get that production schedule kind of ramped up. And so that's what we propose. This is the rest of this is the terms approved prior in the last board action, which was back in. I don't have that on here, but remember when we did that, Laura? It was in the fall, I believe. But yeah, the only update now is, like I said, that 50% year rent in year 3 in exchange for an automatic escalator in year 6, and then that escalator would stay in place for 6 through 10.
So it says term 5 or 10 years. So if they signed a 5-year lease, they could basically be there free for 2.5 years and then leave.
No, we're gonna allow 10 years. And talking to the tenant, yeah, that's one term where that Dick Anderson wants 10 years also, and actually the tenant wants 10 years. So we've kind of taken 5 years off the table. So yeah.
With this change, are they prepared to sign a lease finally?
They're getting much closer. Laura's working with Sweetgrass Development to try and find some capital financing for the production line. We're trying to get them in to figure out how that production line can kind of get put in place with what's that funding called? Remember?
There's several of them.
A couple programs that the state has.
There's several grant programs. A lot of money, though, that they can use for that capital that is sitting there. So
the plan right now will be to go ahead and place the order for the 3 units. And then Josh from Dick Anderson is pretty confident that during construction of those units, we can expand that to 6 units. So we're going to move ahead with the 3 initial ones. And then as we get into production, see if we can expand to 6 as we work with them. So that gives us a little bit more time to kind of sort out what they're doing. I mean, it's a good project. It's definitely a good project. I think they're the right tenant. It would do a lot for that development to get them in there. So I definitely want to keep that door open. They're anxious to move ahead in the next year or so in terms of expanding. So I think the timing fits quite well. They really need to expand. And what they told us is really we're the only one that's presented a viable option for them to do that. And so I think that's good. I mean, I think, what I really like about their project is it kind of fits the max capability of this product that we're building. I mean, it really, for them to have a major production facility in the way that in what they do in this facility kind of brings out the absolute high points of what this product's able to do. I mean, it's real manufacturing, in this sort of cookie cutter, repeatable, common box. And so I think it's pretty exciting in that extent because we're really right away showing the max capability of this product.
Okay. You're spending a tremendous amount of your incredibly valuable time and Laura's incredible valuable time on a prospect, not a tenant, a prospect that, from what I can see, is not willing to commit. And I have this conversation with my guys all the time. We're getting close to cutting bait.
Yeah, I mean, we spend maybe, an hour every 2 weeks.
Who else are we focusing in on for these 3 units? Do we have any other prospects?
Dick Anderson has a couple. What's that?
This holy grail that we have out there is not at all attractive to me as a sales manager, right? As a sales person,
Yep.
you keep presenting the hope,
Sure.
and it doesn't seem like we're moving forward. I'm just being the voice of
You can only
cold
push a
water.
rope so far. I mean, what I'll tell you is it's a good tenant, it's an important project for the community if we can land it. And we just got done talking about the need for growth in our community. This product is really designed to do it. I mean, you know, we've got $1 million in infrastructure we were able to put in, but we've got to focus it on industrial. If I could put anything else over there, you know, maybe I would put something else over there, but it's got to be an industrial tenant. I mean, you know, so, I mean, that limits our field some. And we spend, I would say, what, maybe an hour every 2 weeks on this project? I mean, it's not a lot.
I probably have a little more, but,
Yeah.
you know, a great example where we put a lot of time in
These
is
hangars.
AvMax, and we have a great tenant now. And it took this much work with AvMax to go through all these programs, to get funding in place to help them navigate just all the different things that come with it, and here we are today. So I understand what you're saying.
And even
but-
with AvMax, every couple of years, we have, somebody gets a wild hair, Rich, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with a few of them. And, you know, and we go up there and we spend a month or so running every dead end down and nothing ever happens. You know, so I mean, to land the bigger projects, you've got to invest, you know, some time. You know, I mean, you know, there isn't a proven need for this product in Great Falls. They exist in many communities. You know, they certainly exist in most of the Montana communities. A lot of them are at the airport. Missoula's is at the airport, there's one in Billings, right at the airport. You know, so it should work. But right now, what we have is a giant green field that's been a green field for 50 years. If we're going to change that axiom, we're going to have to invest some time, think differently, and invest some of it in these wild ideas. You know, this one, if we land it, I mean, it's a huge deal, and it changes the perception of what that land is in the community. It also begins to do what I think we've needed to do in Great Falls for a long time, which is develop down the interstate. Every major community develops down the interstate. Great Falls hasn't. You know, we have the same entrances and exits essentially that we've had for many, many years. And so this really begins to build a retail frontage out there along the interstate so we can capture some of that quick food, some of that potential hotel stay, and other stuff that we should be capturing out there that we're not. I mean, I've had many people, Canadians and other folks, tell me they drive straight through Great Falls because the food is so far off the interstate. You know, so I mean, this really, you know, begins to change that dynamic. We've got 300 acres out there. I mean, we're going to have to be a little bit patient in how we get that invested. But I mean, if you look at the 10 years I've been here, and we've gone from $2.5 million in revenue, last year was 5.4. I think we're 2.3 to now 5.4 in the audit that's coming out. I mean,
Yeah, 5.4.
like I know how to develop revenue.
Well, I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying that you might have blinders on this one,
Maybe,
this one.
yeah, maybe.
This one. I mean, and I'm not saying this project, I'm saying this prospect.
Yep,
Not the project.
it certainly could
The
be.
prospect.
Yep, it certainly could be.
So you're giving the flexibility to this person because they're kind of the pioneer of this idea
The first
for us,
tenant in.
which should then hopefully spur on other individuals to come in to see
Yeah.
the blueprint
Right.
already. What's
Yeah.
the worst case scenario? If you go.
We sit on 3 vacant units for a few years and we move our snow equipment into them because we don't have any other use. I mean, you know, and that's why we're kind of kicking the SRE expansion down the road is, you know, we can use more storage space. I mean, we have a project planned to use that storage space. So if we can't get there with a tenant, and, you know, frankly, I mean, we would be there with this tenant if it weren't for the massive escalation that's occurred in the last 2 to 3 years. I mean, a lot of the building, and I'm sure you see this. I mean, it'd be interesting to know that massive increase in building permit costs you have divided by number of permits.
Oh.
Because, I mean, the cost we're seeing on everything is essentially doubled. I mean, this project down here was going to be $3.5 million, and now $7 million. You know, so I mean, we got nailed right between building utilities. We got the TIF agreement approved. We're out of time. If we don't get it done by October and have units by the end of the year, it turns into a pumpkin. You know, that money's gone forever, right? So I mean, we had to act quickly to get in front of that that expiring TIF with this project and get some units in the ground. And so if we'd been back at the cost we were when we started this project, I have no doubt he would be in there, he'd be signed. I mean, I have absolutely zero doubt of that. But, you know, the costs are substantially higher. These units now are about twice what we said they were going to be.
And I think you're right, Sean, but, you know, initially when we started all these discussions, it was without any commitment of any sort. And we had kind of already agreed, decided to move on with it, knowing that it may be worst case vacant, so.
I'm concerned where we are focused on one prospect and not beating the bushes for other potential tenants.
It's out on LoopNet.
That's my concern.
Yeah, it's out on LoopNet. I mean, we've definitely talked to a couple other tenants. I mean, I don't know how long we've been working with this tenant. It's been less than a year, right? Because we had the car wash in there initially.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we've had other tenants we've worked with. The car wash went away. But I mean, this isn't the only tenant we've worked with. We've had several. There's a couple people that wanted them just basically for their shop, you know, more or less. But a lot of that's gotten priced out of the market as the cost has gone up. And hopefully those costs will come back down, you know, so that these units will be more available to more people. I mean, certainly if you look at the price of a stud, you know, if you watch wood, you know, or how about a piece of plyboard? I don't know how many people use plyboard, but, you know, a sheet of 4x8 down there, I mean, you know, now it was at $62 at the height of the pandemic. And now I bet you can go down there and get one for under 20. You know, so some of the costs are coming down. You know, hopefully that'll begin to factor into the units in the future so that, you know, we can get more businesses that would be interested in this product.
Is there some way to, you know, I'm just thinking, so then in 45 days they come back and go, geez, John, how about this? And rather than maybe some incentive from our side saying, we'll do this, but here's a date that we need to.
We've already told them we had to order the 3 units. So, I mean,
no, I understand, but a date, we'll make this concession, but here's, you need to sign by this date, or not that we're not gonna do it,
Right.
but then we need to come back and talk.
Right, I mean, so if it's a good
Something on our
project this
side
year,
when we're.
I mean, I'm back to pushing the rope, right? I mean, you know, this is a mom and pop business. I mean, they don't have a third person in that office. You know, I mean, it is those two making the decisions. You know, and so, I mean, we can only go as fast as they have the capacity to analyze it and work it through. You know, they've got other irons in the fire. This business may not end up in our town, I'm telling you that right now. I mean, this business may end up elsewhere. You know, and so, you know, it's an important regional project. It's an important project for us. It changes the view of the property. It changes the view of what we are. It's important to keep it here. It's an image we need in our community. You know, it's important for a lot of reasons, and we don't spend a tremendous amount of time on them. I've already told them, look, we're gonna have to order the 3, and then you're gonna have to catch back up during production if we're going to 6. You know, and so, you know, I mean, we've done, you know, quite a bit to try and accommodate them and tell them, look, you know, it's closing in. But, you know, his project is still a good project for next year if it doesn't work this year. I still want that project, you know, so I don't want to wrangle too much, you know, to where he's just like, you know what, F off, I'm going somewhere else, you know, including another town. I mean, that would be a tremendous failure for our whole community.
John, what's the 5-year or 10-year view? What's the potential of that area? Just kind of help me understand.
So it's 300 acres, and these units, you know, we've got a forecast that we've put together. These 5-6 units are going to yield about $150,000 per year for us in revenue, and so it's not a huge expansion, but the 300 acres down there, we need to start moving that towards the market. And really nothing has worked prior. We were pretty close. I mean, we had good discussions on the shopping center a few years back with a big REIT that was looking to invest in a shopping center. Those, I think, pretty well. We've met with Lowe's, we've met with Costco. Guess what they told us? No growth. I mean, that's flat what we were told. Your community has no growth, you know, until there's growth, we can't come. You know, and so, I mean, when you know, I've developed a lot of land. I mean, if you want to go look at the Great Falls Business Center or the Colorado Springs Business Center down there that I did, Northrop Grumman Aerospace, and they just got an Amazon center. I mean, that was a tremendously successful development. Seattle, look where the FAA regional headquarters is now. That was fallow land that had old houses on it. It's now the FAA's Northwest Regional Headquarters. I know a lot about developing land. This is probably my specialty, in terms of airport land. And so, we've got to move it to market. We've got to plug in the right plug, to figure out how we can get that property to market. One of the right plugs is getting $1 million worth of utilities in, through the TIF district. And in order to do that, we have to use industrial development. The community doesn't have industrial condos. It doesn't have incubator industrial space. If you talk to the community, and Brett Dunny will be the first to tell you, there isn't enough industrial space in here, particularly for the small end user, the mom and pop welding shop, the sign builder, the paint and sand guy that's doing industrial coatings. There's not space for them in our community. And so it's the right product, but it's not the end goal. If we can get 3 of these units in, and they're generating a few $100,000 a year, maybe even $1 million a year, the end goal is that other 200 acres of now, we're working with, a potential development up here, how do you say it? I mean, the multi-purpose center. This tenant would help us with that project. And if, we get a multi-purpose center up here, now you're talking hotel, you're talking restaurants, now you're talking potential for retail, because you're gonna have hundreds of people over there all the time. That is the long-range wish list for how we're trying to develop that property. Without growth in the community, there isn't a whole lot of natural tenants, right? I mean, if the community was growing like a Bozeman or even a Helena, right? I mean, then you could be out there saying, well, where's Winco going to go? Probably goes into Shopko, but maybe Costco, maybe Kohl's, 2 or 3 of those guys. We don't have that yet. We've got to do something more creative. And these industrial condos are a way we can step into that and find tenants, these small mom and pops that have no space to be in, and get them up here in a space that they can work out of. It's a growth strategy. It's not just, it kind of moves more towards our mandate as an economic development engine in the region to try and do this project.
And this amendment doesn't reduce our return on investments.
Exact same. All it does is it moves it from one end to the back end, trying to help them get production scaled up.
Which is what we want.
What's that?
That's what we want. We want them to be successful.
Absolutely.
Does this mean we have to give the next guy the same good deal?
No,
The next guy?
absolutely not. No, the FAA has long allowed for the first tenant in to get a better deal. In terms of, when I did Northrop and Aerospace, they both got a rent holiday, a similar rent holiday. It's not, 2-year rent holiday is fairly common for a bigger project, in a development at an airport. That's not that uncommon. It just gives them some time to get in there, get your development started, shake out the bugs, and then the future ones, will be a different footing.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Can I have a motion to approve the amended warehouse condo lease terms?
I'll make a motion to approve the amended lease.
Got a motion? Any further questions or discussion? And a second? Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. And nay? And the ayes have it. All right, no further business on the agenda. Any Airport Authority Board comments? Commissioner Husted? Commissioner Hogan?
No.
Commissioner Gibbs? Commissioner Timbo?
None.
Commissioner Eric? Lots of good discussion today. I appreciate the input from everybody. I have no additional comments. Any additional public comments? Awesome. With no further business, we'll declare this session adjourned. We'll take 5 and come back to the work session. All right. Did you catch your breath?